Hey everyone. So I love tower defense / city builder management games. It's almost like a guilty pleasure for me, but I don't really feel guilty at all. Those games are awesome. Back in college, my obsession when it came to this type of game was a game called Kingdoms and Castles, and that was really about it for me. Nowadays, it seems like there's a bunch more in that intersection of genre, which is great. It could just be that I'm finally noticing a bunch of great games, I'm not really sure. Regardless of that, I recently stumbled upon Thronefall, and it's really good. So we're going to talk about that for a bit. So real quick, I want to dive into the background of this game and the people who made it, at least as much as I can, given that there doesn't seem to be a ton of info on these guys since they're an incredibly small team. But I just wanted to touch on them real quick. So Thronefall was made by Grizzly Games, who have previously worked on a game called Superflight, as well as being listed as one of the developers on Islanders, which is a relaxing city builder that you can play in short bursts. I think they were the original Steam developers and then it got ported to other consoles, but don't quote me on that. It seems to me that they're sort of sticking to that same vein of making games that are meant to be played in short bursts of free time, similar to their previous work. They had also previously said that they wanted to make a game that could be more accessible to an audience who had less experience with gaming in general and less time. Based on my experience so far, it seems like they've hit the nail on the head when it comes to achieving those goals. Granted, the game is still in early access, so the mechanics and gameplay could get way more complicated, just get bloated, but I really don't see them going in that direction, especially with how satisfying the core experience is already, and with their experience with keeping games small and just keeping the sort of gameplay loop tight in that way. But speaking about gameplay, I should probably move on to talking about that aspect of the game, since that's the most important part in something like this. Given that they made the game to be able to be played in short bursts, it should come as no surprise that it's incredibly easy to pick up and play without an extensive tutorial or any sort of story that could bog down the play and short burst aesthetic of the game. In fact, when you look at the tutorial, it can be easy to forget that you were even playing a tutorial, because it feels like it's just a normal level of the game, albeit without all the added complications that come on later on. That's not to say the tutorial shows off everything there is, but it does a great job of giving you an understanding of how things will work in the game, while keeping things fun and not overstaying its welcome so you can get into trying the other levels and challenges fairly quickly. Speaking of those other levels, I should probably also actually talk about what they entail and explain the game if you weren't able to get the gist of it based on the footage I should be showing. Basically in every level, you are in control of a king on horseback who can freely roam around, and during the day you build and upgrade buildings around the level as you prepare for the nighttime, which is when you are rushed by waves of enemies, similar to any tower defense game. You can only build certain types of buildings in specific locations, and you have to make smart decisions as you play in order to balance protecting your castle, as well as making sure you have enough structures built in order to make money to prepare for the next wave. Eventually you get to the last wave, and that is when you have effectively completed the level, and do it all over again with the next one. There's slight variations between each level, but that's pretty much the gist of it. But I would be a little too simple if it just ended there. Still fun probably, but I'm sure things would get stale a lot quicker. As you try out and eventually complete all the levels the first time around, you will unlock different buffs, weapons for your characters, and handicaps to apply to levels. This will affect how you play the game and just your overall score at the end of the level as well. You can use up to 5 buffs at a time, so you'll have to play around with the best combinations for each level depending on the enemy types and layout of the area as you get more used to the differences in those levels. In addition to that, you can apply as many handicaps as you want if you need more of a personal challenge or if you want to try and beat the different challenges specified in each level. But I would be careful. The game starts out fairly easy but can ramp up quickly as you get into those later levels, and they just send out more waves of more complicated enemies at you. In a lot of ways, it almost feels like a real-time puzzle game instead of any of the other genres is taking inspiration from. That's not to say that there is one solution to any of these levels, but you will find, as I have at least, that there are certainly wrong solutions. Things can go very badly very quickly if you aren't paying attention and thinking ahead about where you need to be prioritizing on this map. If there's any criticism of this game that I can mention, it would probably be the fact that it isn't the most expansive experience, but even then, it was made by a small team and is still in early access, so I'm fairly confident that there will be more levels to come, especially considering how positive the reception has been so far. Another thing that I could see being a criticism, but I generally like, is the fact that the art style is very simple. It makes playing the game and reading what you're supposed to be doing very easy at a glance as you are dealing with these waves of enemies and trying to make split-second decisions. It has a very clean and simple look while still looking appealing to me, but I can see how that could be a turnoff to someone who is expecting something more complicated. I personally, though, think they struck a pretty good balance. Besides that, though, I think it could be cool if there was an overarching story to the whole experience. Nothing too involved or complicated, nothing that you really need to think about. It would just be nice if there was something going on that sort of strung the levels together in some way. As it stands, each level has an interesting name and a unique environment, while the enemies are designed in a way that makes me want to know more. It is not a deal breaker by any means, but it just seems as if all the pieces are there to make a fun story to go along with this fun game. If that eventually happens, great, and I could definitely see them doing that down the line once they have ironed out more levels and focused on what I'm sure people are most interested in. If not, though, it would still be a great time too, so there's no real loss either way. And that's all there really is to say when it comes to Thronefall. So to give my final thoughts on Thronefall, I think it's pretty obvious where I stand on the game. It's a relatively simple game to learn, but one that is hard to finish if you want to complete all the challenges that are thrown your way. It is pretty short overall, but I don't really see that as a detriment given the price and the fact that the devs seem to be adding more to it in the future since it is still actively being worked on. I would recommend this game if you like city builders, but even more if you like tower defense games, since there isn't really a sense of permanent progression like in more traditional city builder games. Honestly, even if you just like the visual aesthetic, I would recommend you give it a shot. Worst case scenario, you're at like $10, which is a small price to pay to support an indie game and try something new. That's it for me today, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.